but I'm just very excited about that way of working where it's like you don't know how many developers there are that are just kind of lurking like in the background, like watching this kind of Bitcoin economy form. And you don't know, like, because I guess it's also not just developers who can build. There's these memes recently that have been popping out, right, with like hyper Bitcoinization and like $10 million, and I think like for me, I'm like incredibly bullish on that. Like when I'm seeing these memes pop out, like just like out of nowhere, I'm like, okay, this is a really, really good sign. Like really good sign that people are starting to coordinate, and like, because you're just not going to be able to stop it when there's like like another 100 more people working in this way, 200, 300, 1,000, like this just becomes like unstoppable. I mean, like if Ethereum could have scaled, I think Ethereum would have been used by like every single person on the planet right now because of that philosophy that they had. But thankfully for us, they they couldn't scale, and they kind of got wrecked. And so now like Bitcoin in its kind of original form has this opportunity to basically like take over.
To drive the point home just a little bit harder, if it weren't for open source code, Bitcoin wouldn't exist. Whatever it is you're thinking in your head right now as you're watching this, try it. The minimum tools are available to you right now to be able to publish something on the chain that other people can buy and redeem. We don't have to have a perfect redemption system, right? eBay was really clunky when people started buying things from it. Etsy is still rather clunky when you're buying things that are one-off or not mass-produced. Don't let the perception of these roadblocks, that things that aren't perfect, stand in your way. This is the frontier of something new, and everybody is doing less than perfect or less than efficient models to get their goals done. So don't let anything standing in your way stop you. Do what it is that's in your mind, and let people tell you it's a bad idea quickly so that you can move on to the next great idea, right? Like, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to start. Go do it. The resources are there.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Today we have Zach Weiner and Liam Chai joining us. Welcome to the show, guys. How you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Doing great. Happy to be on the show.
Absolutely. So I really wanted to start us off by talking about, what precisely are the differences between an open protocol and a closed protocol in both of your opinions?
And Liam, why don't you start? Because I use them, but you guys are like building out some.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say, like, at Relay, we really are trying to live that philosophy of building as openly as we can. I mean, that comes with its own sort of challenges in terms of like, when you're building open, how do you actually, continue running a business when you have such like tools that are just fully on chain. But I think that's the main thing with open protocols versus a closed one is that the open protocol is fully on chain, and there isn't anything proprietary, or there aren't any fees that are like associated with it on chain. So like the relay order lock is just the whole source code is on chain, and the thing can be run without any relay fees kind of being stuck in the middle of that. So when Relay launched the order lock, there was nothing that made it kind of relay, if that made sense. It was just kind of put out on chain. But obviously, because we were the first ones to build it, we've been trying to I guess maximize the amount of BSVs that we can earn in that time before like the rest of the market kind of catches on. But I think that's the main difference with open versus closed, is that you can't, it's not a walled garden, and you can't really build with this sort of walled garden mentality when you're building on an open protocol.
Or just when you're building in general, right? So I'll pick up right there, which is from the developing side of things, not from the business admin side of things, but as in the developer seat, you can't really use a closed protocol, right? So Brittany, we've talked, that I know that you want to be releasing NFTs, right? And so Twetch and RC is by volume, per single individual NFT collection, probably a better bet if you can get listed there somehow without having to pay the listing fees that are charged by this platform. That protocol has prohibited you from taking the actions that you want. By Relay making the protocol open, not only can you take the actions that you want because you want to do it, but I can build more on top of it, knowing where and what those transactions are coming from and how they're formed. So Relay believes that they're actually adding value to their own bank account, for lack of a better way to describe it, not necessarily by continuing to add more Bitcoin to the bag, but by growing how much Bitcoin is worth. And you do that by network effect that you can't get on a closed protocol, that people with creative ideas can't just build on top of because we have an idea. You get there by allowing the creative people or the people or the people who just want to tinker to build whatever it is that they can think of that allows new entrants to become interested in whatever it is that we're doing, whether or not they care about the technology, just the thing that's being done.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like Brittany, you had was it Zyler and Derek on, I think, on the last show, and they were talking about Bitcoin as the, everyone being shareholders of the Bitcoin Corporation. And I think at Relay we definitely have a very similar view, and I think Relay itself as a company is, you can kind of see Relay as a sort of a department of the Bitcoin Corporation. So we're kind of like just a specific department working on a specific area within the Bitcoin Corporation. But ultimately we all hold Bitcoin, and yeah, we want the value to accrue to our Bitcoins instead of to like the Relay shares or some other equity in that form.
So it's growing the network, and how do we increase the value of the network versus collectively like trying to increase our own like net worth type deals. Is that what I'm getting?
Just a fundamental outlook on how both sets of actions are trying to lead to the same goal, right? Like having more buying power for ourselves. We want to accrue value to ourselves for the work that we've done. But by one path, it says bring everybody in and let all the individual people figure out how to raise the value on their own. And the other side says, we have some great ideas and we want to be able to make as much off of that for as long as possible. So rather than let everybody share in the great ideas, we're going to keep it within this, and you called it a walled garden. If you can't get into those walls, you can't share in that experience. And to me, that's fundamentally not Web3, at least not in the way that I envisioned it when, and to be honest, I came to that conclusion from an Ethereum-based, philosophy of what Web3 could be. I got introduced to it in 2017 through Ethereum. But that just the walled garden, the idea that a protocol would be closed or not published publicly, doesn't sit well with me in alignment with the goals that I believe Bitcoin are for.
Yeah. So what would you say are the key differences between what makes a protocol or system open versus closed, and what are the benefits and the trade-offs? Like, so what's the difference between, I guess, building on something like Handcash that uses this is where I'm having trouble with it, right? Because if Handcash runs on basically kind of like a clone of Run, but they closed it off, why does it feel like more people are building like games and stuff for Handcash? And it kind of feels like, I guess, there's less development going on with Relay, or at least not significant stuff that we can see visually. Am I wrong for thinking that way or seeing it that way? I just feel like Handcash's stuff is like more in your face. I'm not saying one is more right than the other or either which way. I'm just saying there's obviously some very key differences between these two companies. And I'm curious because it's very obvious that Handcash would seem to be like a closed protocol and Relay would be an open protocol. Why does it feel like we're seeing more with Handcash's development versus Relay's development if Relay is running off this like open? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think one reason is, at Relay, we haven't really been great at documentation, whereas the Handcash team are, I mean, yeah, they're amazing, right? They've got this, very well explained documentation on how to use their Handcash SDK. And so for kind of, developers who are maybe not so experienced in the Bitcoin space, when they see that, they it's just much easier for them to kind of come in and start developing on Handcash. But then when you hear examples of like, I guess more maybe Bitcoin native devs, like, there was one guy on the Spaces the other day called Taja, and he was kind of assessing the whole ecosystem. And even though Relay docs are just like non-existent, he said himself, right, that he was forced to build on Relay because Relay was at that, currently right now the only open sort of protocol in the BSV space. And so he, for his game app and things like that, he couldn't feel like, he didn't feel like he could build on Handcash.
So I think there's one key distinct difference for me at this point in time, and I don't know if it will change or if it was just like an oversight and an upgrade from Handcash. But at some point in the last year, Handcash began to require that the calls to Handcash be made from a known server. Okay, so right now, almost all of the development that I do for blockchain, specifically for the stuff that I do on Relay and Punicorn, but also a lot of what I do in the business stuff, is entirely done by the client in their browser without speaking to my server, without really speaking to any server, until they're pushing a transaction to run, and then it goes to run server so that they could broadcast it into the node. But with Handcash now, the client needs to first speak to my server before my server speaks to Handcash, before Handcash speaks to the node. And for me, that's I don't want to say a bridge too far, because I don't think it is. I think what you get in efficiency for being willing to set up that server and run a more traditional Web 2 interaction between a web page that requests something from a server and gets information back is pretty great, honestly. With Run specifically, when you have a lot of items or coins or just contracts in general, it becomes difficult to load, right? I think the threshold right now is around 60 or 70 gigs before you'll time out the first time. So if you have more than 70 NFTs in your Relay wallet or a Handcash wallet, well, maybe not Handcash because they don't do a seed, but in your Run wallet, wherever that Run wallet lives, if you try to load that wallet on your own, the default Run settings are going to time out, right? So if you have 60 or 70 NFTs, you're not going to get your full wallet back without trying multiple times to make that thing sync. Handcash makes it really easy for you to get that state back. As a developer, you just say like, hey, I need to make a change to this account, and they give you the endpoint where you can actually make the change without making you find all of the changes for all of those items on the chain before this point in time. So there is a good advantage for that. With that said, Relay has opened up a Web 2 style API set for developers like myself, who can say, hey, listen, here, I have the data. I just don't have the state of the chain. You guys have the state of the chain. Let me send you the data that I want to modify, and you send me back a transaction that I need to broadcast for myself. And so this is where the fundamental difference comes in, aside from server and non-server client, is on Relay and with Run natively, I, the user, when I click a button, I broadcast that transaction for myself. Handcash receives the transaction that I want and then manages making that transaction on my behalf. So I think of it as like Apple and Google, right? Like iOS versus Android. Is, do you want the efficiencies from the managed system that come with some extra costs, some extra overhead, and some extra know-how? Or do you want to be able to build whatever it is you want, however it is you want, whenever it is you want, which is more like the Relay model, which, you're doing it from your browser, so they don't really have any say or ability to maybe help manage your state. So you have to do a little bit more of that on your own, even though you don't need a server or to talk to their network to broadcast the transaction. I think those are just kind of the two fundamental differences. And the philosophy between the two will probably always have developers for both.
Did you want to add anything in there, Liam?
Yeah, like Zach mentioned just about the seed. So that was I guess from Handcash point of view, that was a trade-off that they felt was important for them to take in terms of improving the user experience, where users don't encounter having to save this 12-word seed and write it down. But I think in the sort of longer term, that might not be it basically means that you can't really have this this full interoperability when you as the company. So I think it's Handcash and Haste now, I think, that hold the seeds for their users. And so, I don't really know what happens when, either of those two companies were to go bankrupt, for example, or disappear. So like, yeah, they definitely have a UX improvement in terms of like how the user feels with, not having to remember their 12-word seeds. But yeah, like longer term, I think it poses some tricky situations. I mean, today we're seeing it, right, with like Celsius and things like that, these centralized custodians who are having, just saying that, yeah, withdrawals are now halted and you can't access your coins. So, I don't know, like, because Handcash have this sort of, it's semi-centralized. It's kind of, it's a bit of a middle ground, I guess. But I think in the longer term, when it comes to building and like, I guess one of the benefits of things like Ethereum is they have this full composability, right? Where developers can just build tiny components and then it can work, because as long as each user is kind of working directly on the chain, and so they have access to their 12 words, then developers can just build little components and then to kind of disappear. Whereas if Handcash disappear, then it's going to be hell, right? Like for the, I don't know, 100,000 users they've got, it's going to be really like just mad if Handcash ever disappear.
Right.
And so again, this is, from a matter of a consumer's perspective, a user's perspective, just a matter of preference. So yes, I might lose my 12 words. That's absolutely true. I might lose my password to Relay. That's absolutely true. But on Handcash, I now can't change my phone number, right? So like I have to maintain my phone number now in order to keep that account, which means if I move to a new place and want a different area code that's localized, I have to now spend $10, $12 a month to keep my old number available just to access my money. The same is true of my email address. So if you had a corporate email address when you came onto Handcash, you better hope that corporation is going to let you continue to use that email address, or you got to move your money out, right? Like, so there are trade-offs on both sides. And I genuinely just believe it's a matter of personal preference at this moment.
As I understand it, though, they said that it was about security, because the way Handcash like holds or custodializes funds is that they split up the seed or your keys, and they hold half, and then like another entity holds like the other half. And so in order for transactions to happen or whatever, both keys have to come together. So it's like this security thing. So I guess
also that means they both have to be available, right? Otherwise you can't spend or move your coin. It's
true. So yeah, I see trade-offs and benefits to both here. It's kind of like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But
we're just so early that there are problems. That's just where we're at. This is a new thing. This is a new paradigm for a account holding system. And we've been used to username and password for 25 or 30 years now, probably longer than that. We'll come up with a better solution one day, but if you want to play in the playground now, these are the rules for how the playground works, right? And these are your options.
So let's dive into that a little bit, right? What are some key things that either of you think that developers in the space should be aware of when building on Run? What are some things that would make it easier to understand about development on Run?
I'll let Zach go, because I'm not actually technical myself. So
okay, I would say that I want to talk to people who might be interested in developing on BSV or on Run specifically, who come from a different chain, whether that be Solana or Ethereum, sure, or some other thing that you might choose to build on today. Almost every interaction that you're going to send to your wallet in order to be signed by you, right? So you click a button on some website, maybe that's Mint, and it pops up the screen on your wallet that says, I want to do something, authorize it. That's being sent through basically one data provider called Infura. And there's a ton of efficiency that we get as developers by being able to use the library called Web3, W3JS. But all of that is going through one provider, which is a centralized point of failure. And yes, they have invested a ton of money in making sure they have scalable infrastructure that's not going to go down. right? But they make those investments in times when number go up. And so in times when number go down, you don't know what they're going to have to cut because they're a business. That's a risk that I think a lot of Web3 developers don't necessarily understand they're taking on these other chains, that is sort of mitigated by the ability to do peer-to-peer transactions directly and write contracts into a script that's exchanged peer-to-peer directly, rather than going through the accounting model or forcing a pipe through an Infura. So there are some hidden risks that most developers don't recognize that they may be facing today, that don't peek their head out as much necessarily on a protocol like Run. And with that said, that's sort of an efficiency, but on the flip side of that, that means we have to do more to manage the state of our data on Run. So this is kind of a gotcha. The way that Bitcoin transactions and contracts work today on the Run protocol means you have to know the entire history of a set of UTXOs, outputs, wherein, on another chain, you might just be checking an account balance, which is an easier thing to do when there's basically that spreadsheet that says, return me this number of, I have 3 Ethereum. Where things get tricky or picky in that respect, I think I've always found that Bitcoin is actually more efficient. So the way that I was used to doing it wasn't necessarily better. But there are a few minor quirks like that along the ways in building on Run, or even building on Bitcoin JS or Nimble, which you'll need to do more advanced things on Run, that might not be as well documented. Relay is admitting, they don't really document as well as they'd like. I know that Run needs help and support in documenting errors and bugs. But for whatever those things that pop up are, and there are more than just sync, you can usually find a relatively good solution in Atlantis Slack, which is not a public space like a Telegram where developers talk, but there's a channel in that Slack for every protocol, including Run. And the people who are facing these problems go in there every day to help ask other people, how do I solve it? So I don't know how to articulate what the detailed problems are that your audience might face, but what I will say is whatever it ends up being, go to the Atlantis Slack and you'll probably help find a solution, or somebody that you could talk it through with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, Liam, what kind of things is Relay looking into doing right now, as far as like new ideas, new implementations, new functionalities in Relay?
So we like Zach was saying, we open up the API to kind of make it easier to interact. For those who might not be he said, there's a web 2.0 API, so it's just kind of plug and play. We've got other things on our mind, like maybe something related to identity. We've got lots of internal discussions about I guess like the drawbacks of Paymail, which is not actually on chain. And so something like an on-chain identity is a solution that is probably very needed right now in the space to kind of go forward. It's one of the reasons why, like, if you had an on-chain identity that was tied to your 12-word seed, then it just means that you can like that whole bringing your whole data set with you everywhere you go, no matter what app you use. That starts to become more of a reality when you have an actual on-chain identity. So that's kind of where we kind of want to be moving towards. We're also gonna try and open source the Minter, so split the the Relay marketplace from the Minter, and then just have the Minter as a standalone thing, and open source it so that we're not the sort of the obstacle for people wanting to, whether it's like 3D or MP4. We won't be the kind of slow, like the people putting stopping people from just allowing them to mint whatever the hell they want to mint. Because obviously we benefit from like this massive diversity of different kinds of NFTs that go directly on the chain, and so we just want to encourage that more.
And how might you be going about specifically implementing that Minter? Are you going to work in conjunction with like Gorilla Pool's Mappy, or how are you guys going about doing that to increase? Like, are you increasing the 10 megabyte block precise limit, the 10 megabyte limit,
Yeah.
or as what
So
I'm trying
yeah,
to
I mean, well,
understand.
so yeah, step one is just to open source the minter. So we've got like relayx.com/mint, and you can mint fungible tokens, NFTs there. But we just want to open source that part. So someone might be able to just pull that code and like I think a couple of people in the scammers meeting were talking about a scammers minter that they want to make. So that could be run on a separate website. There could be like 20 different interfaces of this minter that allow you to mint
I see.
various options. Because like if you're minting like a Gopnik collection, that minting experience is going to be different if you want to mint like a physical item that will have to be redeemed in the future, or if you want to mint fungible token. So it's like there's kind of unique experiences that people can develop interfaces for that will then enable even more mints to come directly onto the chain.
I see.
And then as for the 10 megabyte limit, yeah, that one, that's at the moment a minor imposed thing. I think Gorilla Pool have mentioned that they want to be able to accommodate bigger sizes, but I'm not. Yeah, maybe Zach knows more on this, but I'm not 100% sure on where the conversations are for that.
Sure. So I think number one is the point in open sourcing the Minter is specifically to answer these questions by people who care about that individual topic, right? So for me, I know that I want semantic markup around the NFTs that we're producing, so I care about metadata, right? Brittany, I'm imagining for you, you want to do something that's got a high file size, right? A large file size. So the 10 megabyte limit is the thing that you care about. And by open sourcing the Minter, the people who care about these individual problems can find solutions for the problems that they care about and either charge for other people to use them or contribute them back to the open source suite. It's their preference, right? And that's what you get by open sourcing or making these protocols open, is your ability to choose where you want participation and where you'd like to make something closed for yourself. I'm personally a believer that my participation in the Minter probably won't be web-based. So I'm thinking that it should be a desktop-based application that can use the resources of the machine people are publishing from in order to optimize what's being published instead of being limited to what your web browser is available to do, right? So, if you're a person who doesn't necessarily care about the difference between a 4K and a 1080p resolution for the thing that you're minting, the Minter should be able to optimize that for you, right? You can't really do that in the browser without having servers. You can do that on your whatever machine we're running Zoom from right now, right? It can be done. And so if you're a 3D image creator who's creating mugs, right? Well, this is mugs, right, for people to drink out of. You probably really do care about every dot in that DPI. And so you're going to want something that's uploading everything from this, or attempting to upload everything from this file in one shot and not chunking it the way that the web would. So for you, approaching the solution from that viewpoint is going to create a different maybe tab in the desktop application that would upload slightly differently or create the NFT slightly differently than a generative art project that really cares about the metadata and ranking. And you can think about how the ability to include backing by sats would be in there as well, right? That's like a toggle button. Do you want all of these to be backed by a Bitcoin? Like that, it's something we can do, but nobody's really explored because it hasn't been easy to do from the interface. And do people on Relay care about that? Probably not. Do you want to back your generative art today by sats? Probably not. But I could imagine there are artists out there that would be really intrigued by the idea of having a floor price of their art, right? Where they know that somebody is going to liquidate it if they're not continuing to create to keep the value of previous art over a certain number, so less of theirs exists in the world. They're just cool cases that we can do if it's open source.
Yeah, makes sense. It's kind of like the difference between letting people decide what the problem is and allowing them the ability or the chance to kind of tackle that problem versus knowing that there's a problem and then having to go to a centralized source and be like, hey, there's a problem, can you fix it? And then waiting for them to either fix it or not fix it. So that's what I'm getting out of this. So it's interesting, and I wouldn't say that one is necessarily worse than the other, because they definitely have their benefits and their drawbacks to each one. But sounds like open source is the way to go. So without
Yeah,
rambling too much.
just
Yeah.
just an extra note on that. Yeah, we're almost done with the 3D Minter. It's already on our beta testing site. But even before we even worked on that, there were already a few 3D NFTs that were already trading on Relay. It was just that Relay couldn't render it and display it properly.
Oh, like the ring.
So
there was like a ring, I think.
there was like an AK-47 by PowerRare and a couple of other 3D objects, but they just look like JPEGs on the Relay site. But when you actually looked at the file on chain, it was a 3D file.
Anything that had been minted from CMO.
Yeah, CMO. Yeah.
That was did I cut you off there, or was that it?
No, that was it. I mean,
okay.
that was just to say like how there's use cases that Relay won't have ever thought about, but we want to remain open for the sort of the emergence of.
Right.
And so here's the specific value of the open versus closed protocol, right? Like the people behind CMO cared about 3D. So they went out there and they built something that would let them put 3D on chain the way that they wanted to. And by using an open protocol with no additional coding, it shows up as available for sale on Relay on the secondary market because they used an open protocol to put it on chain, right? They were able to modify the details of what, how they use that protocol, but by conforming to, I'm going to put it, my unique thing on chain this way, Relay didn't have to ask the creator's permission or CMO's permission. They just had to look on chain for things that look like this and display it. And so the display wasn't perfect because they didn't coordinate, but it still showed up enough that you could buy it if you knew what it was and wanted it.
Well, so are you building on Run right now, Zach?
I'm pretty much exclusively Run. So I like the idea of Sensible. It came out later for me. I think it's probably closer to the metal, frankly, but there's just a lot of benefit to really executing JavaScript, not just writing JavaScript and have it underlying, translated to Bitcoin script, but actually being able to see the near plain text updates in a series of outputs so that like a human can go back and see what the changes were. I see a lot of value in that. For me, explaining to developers what's going on makes the conversation much easier. Like I think there are more JavaScript developers than any other type of developer on the planet. And I want people to build more for Punicorns than I did for them, right? They're there, the image is on chain, the metadata is on chain. Like there's literally nothing stopping from somebody going and building a game for Punicorns. I literally couldn't stop them if I wanted to, right? That's an interesting point to make. There's this group that owns the IP of the character, right? This isn't the one that they bought, but you individually own this graphic image and you can make a game for it. You can make an experience that says, I'm only letting people in if you have one of these 6 Punicorns. Not to say that there's any real value that I could tell you why somebody else would do that other than the Punicorn site, but it can be done and I can't stop them from doing it. And that's just a really cool future to think about, like becoming the norm.
Yeah. I think that leads on to like this whole question of how to coordinate. And I'm personally quite, I feel very excited about, like ways of working in like this sort of open development kind of process that happens, because you really are like, you're just kind of looking and then without doing anything, things are just popping up and appearing, right? I mean, like just the other day we had like Andreas was writing these articles about like how to get to like $10 million per Bitcoin. And he's just kind of like, funding him, like, crowdfunding these NFTs and then writing these articles. I can imagine like Relay documentation in the future might be written like that, not by anyone from the Relay team, but, maybe like Zach might write it or Joshua Hensley might write it. And then it's just out there, not because like we paid them, but because they have Bitcoins and they're incentivized to want to do that. And I mean, I think also recently there was the like, so my other handle is the Bitcoin intern, and we, I launched the Diamond Hands app with just like a simple Figma that I kind of put out there, and within like a day, this developer Elvis, who I think he built the front end of the Gopniks, but he reached out and he was like, "This is a really cool idea," and then he said, "Like, how can I help?" Right, and so I've just been talking to him, and he's nearly done. I don't think he actually had any script background, but in the last like couple of weeks, he's been like picking it up and learning it, and he's got like on testnet, we've been doing the Diamond Hands locking now, and I'm pretty, I'm hopeful like we can push that out onto mainnet pretty soon, to be able to lock up your BSV for like a year, 2 years, 3 years, or whatever amount. But I'm just very excited about that way of working, where it's like you don't know how many developers there are that are just kind of lurking like in the background, like watching this kind of Bitcoin economy form. And you don't know, like, because I guess it's also not just developers who can build. Like there's these memes recently that have been popping out, right, with like hyper Bitcoinization and like $10 million. And I think like for me, I'm like incredibly bullish on that. Like when I'm seeing these memes pop out, like just like out of nowhere, I'm like, okay, this is a really, really good sign. Like really good sign that people are starting to coordinate, and like, because you're just not going to be able to stop it when there's like like another 100 more people working in this way, 200, 300, 1,000, like this just becomes like unstoppable. I mean, like if Ethereum could have scaled, I think Ethereum would have been used by like every single person on the planet right now because of that philosophy that they had. But thankfully for us, they couldn't scale, and they kind of got wrecked. And so now like Bitcoin in its kind of original form has this opportunity to basically like take over. But yeah. So I think it's very powerful.
So in your opinion, is there anything like economically that's holding us back, or developmentally like that's holding us back? Like, are there challenges that we're facing from a development standpoint, or are there challenges that we're facing from an economic standpoint that are keeping us from being able to coordinate better in BSV? Or do you feel like we're just naturally learning how to coordinate with each other and kind of wading the waters until we figure it out? Like, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like there have been some people that have said like all the VC money in the space has kind of slowed the like this, like it's kind of slowed this open development way of building because of that VC money.
Right.
And I mean, I'd be quite curious to hear Zach's point of view on this, actually, because I mean, obviously you've been working in this very open development way, but then you've also got your own startup, and I don't know if your startup is VC funded or not, but I'm curious to see how you kind of balance that incentive. Not yet, right.
So
I see. Yeah.
This comes down to your philosophy of business, right? So for me, I don't think that any technology stays secret for very long, right? So you can patent something, which means basically you can go after your biggest competitors if they try to do the same thing as you. But if you try to go after everybody that tinkers around and does something similar to your patent, you're going to bankrupt yourself with lawyers' fees, right? Like, so there's a level of diminishing returns of, am I going to recoup more than my lawyer's fees to go after this use? So for the most part, if you have a patent, people are stepping on it, but you don't care about it until they get to a certain size where it threatens your business. The other way to think about it is, although there are some things that are absolutely patentable that come out of the open build idea, is more, and this is my personal philosophy, is more building an authentic business. So I think it was who put it this way once to me. Tesla has a monopoly on building Teslas and selling Teslas, and Toyota has a monopoly on Camrys, right? If you want a Camry, you can't go to Ford and buy a Camry. You have to go to Toyota, and the same for Tesla Model Y. So if what you're building is an authentic business and people want what you're actually selling, they have to come to you to get the authentic version, which means it really doesn't matter how many copycats there are out there, because they're never going to be the authentic version. And that's just kind of my business philosophy, whether it's because you have to put the order lock on chain. So some, asshole dev like me can go find the output and reverse engineer the script and figure out what the inputs were. Or because, a guy like Craig who worked with somebody he ended up having, a hard time with, who steals trade secrets and takes them somewhere else. The technology is in use and you need people to maintain it. So there's other people exposed to the technology. So it's not going to stay secret forever. And also, this is more esoteric, but I'm a believer in like the Einstein-Tesla theory that neither one of them believed they were, genuinely that great of a genius. What they believed was they were in the right place at the right time. And if it wasn't them, somebody else shortly after would have come up with the same ideas because it was in the ether. So I can't be so egotistical to believe that I was the only one that had these great ideas, and nobody else would have ever been able to come up with them unless I talked about it, so I should patent it. It's probably already in the ether, and the things connect, the dots connected for me because my contextual experience got me to this point today, but somebody else's could have gotten them to the same point earlier than me, and they didn't know how to be a developer, or 2 months from now and they're a better developer than me. So building an authentic business where nobody can replicate what you've been, not just what you build, but what you've been, seems like a better way to build a lasting business to me than trying to focus specifically on the differentials between your product set. And when we get into the digital age, like there are no differences between all of the ERC 721 tokens. They all do the exact same thing, right? So it's only authenticity that gets you somewhere better.
It's a very interesting point. Go ahead, Liam.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, just to add, like, like Jack told me this, like he like a couple of our devs, and I think also Dean Little, and maybe Mark Wilcox say this phrase often, but they say like check the chain, right? There's all these like someone will say something or ask a question, and then their response will be like, check the chain, and it's kind of like when you're I guess when you're like a newbie looking into this, it sounds kind of like, I don't know, pompous or like, maybe a bit rude or whatever. But and I never really understood it properly when they said that, right? Until Jack told me like what they actually meant. And he was telling me about this idea of in the future when you have development is you have like people scanning the chain constantly. And they'll be looking at every single transaction, and what they'll be looking for is like a different kind of transaction that has come through that has never been seen before. And then when they see that, they'll look at it, and then they'll basically start like what Zach was doing to the order lock with the outputs and the inputs, and trying to reverse engineer it. And what they might do in the future is that like this whole space might get so hyper competitive that once someone is like doing testing it for some new idea, and they've just pushed something out to chain. Once it's on the chain, someone else might have already picked it up and reverse engineered it and then launched your product before you've been able to launch your own product, right? So, I mean, obviously we're not there yet, but that's kind of where this is going, right? Where you have this like insanely hyper competitive space, and people are just always checking the chain and just trying to find any clues of what innovation is happening on chain, and then beating, whoever has actually created the innovation, but beating that person to market, and making as much Bitcoins as they can because of that.
And creating a system that is potentially even like neural language processing style AI system that could try to spit back to a manager or business unit owner, hey, I found this new thing on chain, and based on what it's doing, I believe the output, the goal of this contract does X or Y, without a human or an engineer even needing to look at it. Right? Because patterns of bits are the same things as patterns of languages. So us believing that like our brilliance can be saved and stored in secret for some unknown period of time it's just an antiquated idea, right? And I think Disney kind of got it right with their more of a copyright than a patent, in that like copyright only used to last 10 or 15 or 20 years. And then Disney made Mickey Mouse, and they've lobbied to get copyright extended for 70, now 80 or 100 years, which really just means giving credit where credit is due, right? So if I created something awesome that people use for the next 2 or 3 years and then forgot about after that, but cool things were built on top of it using pieces of what I built or from what I built. As long as I'm getting credit, I still have the value to be able to go raise funds on my next idea or take credit for my last one and say, let's do this together, right? And so long as we're all getting that, credit's probably a bad word. Cred in the social context is probably a little bit better there. For our contributions historically and currently, that's going to build a more accessible future than what happens now, where somebody has a good idea, the business runs for a while, then they get removed from their own business and priced out of the market from doing something else, unless they had a hugely successful exit that essentially dumped risk on the public. And fundamentally, as Bitcoiners, like, we don't want that process to continue. And Bitcoin can help us to prevent the excesses there. We just have to model our human behavior around what Bitcoin can provide us, rather than trying to take what used to be, right, this protection of IP, and pretend that it's suitable for the future that's going to exist, whether we want to resist it or not.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like to add to that as well, as we see more tools come on chain, Zach was basically saying it's about your brand, right? It's your brand power that's going to be what matters. And as we see more tools come on chain, and it means more creators are able to just create without having to like tinker around with code. Like we saw that whole NFT wave when people could start, just like artists could start minting their own NFTs and just like selling their JPEGs and then kind of showcasing their talents for creating art. Then we're going to see, just like creators be able to just create, and that's going to be what is like the most important thing, right? It's not going to be like once, because I think with code, right, once code is on chain, then it's just going to live on chain forever, and you don't need to build it again, right? So that's one of the like beauties about this, right, is that like we're all going to really need to kind of find like our unique value to the world and then offer that to the world. It's not going to be like, okay, this is like the current, like this is the most in demand, like highly niche skill right now. It's like, what is your unique brand that you can offer the world? And then that's going to be what you create. And that's going to be how you make your living or
and it's usually, in my opinion, I don't know how soon this will happen, but that'll usually be built around the things that you enjoy doing the most. Right. So rather than going to work for money, for doing something you hate for dollars, right? Because in the future, all of this stuff will become automated. I don't know how to predict the timeline for like total automation, but anything that's repetitive is going to be automated. And the things that make us human are literally the parts of ourselves that have preference for things and caring for things that are unique for us among other humans. And there will always be a market for the opinion, the cultivation, the sharing of experience from other humans that you relate to, that you see and feel a kinship with, and that can't be automated. So if we could start to turn those things into value earlier, before the automation really starts to take away from people who could have cultivated this, but will be too late to do it, then our ability to extend our value into that automated world will be an easier transition for people who aren't technologists today, who don't write code, who can't see this coming.
Yeah, I was about to say, I had a thought there about, the common person doesn't care about how something works. They just need to know that it does work. Whereas people like you and I, we have an innate curiosity about the technology behind it and how can we fix it? How can we improve it? How can we make it better? And so there's two very distinctive type of individuals who are going to involve themselves in Bitcoin. But it seems as though this open source code will allow or facilitate a faster way of us getting to this, what you guys were speaking about just a second ago. It'll allow us to get there faster than closing it off and just meeting consumer demands as they decide that they want something or don't want something. So I'm really excited. I mean, just to see what you guys can build or what anybody else can build. I mean, that's really exciting.
To drive the point home just a little bit harder, if it weren't for open source code, Bitcoin wouldn't exist.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Right? They used open source hashing libraries. They used open source like elliptical digital signature curve libraries. The Python open source library is still used in some respects. So they give credit where credit is due. If you look at the code, you know where it came from, right? So you know who to attribute the breakthrough to. And we got Bitcoin because there was open source code.
Definitely. Well, guys, I know we're coming up to the hour mark here. Was there anything that I should have asked you guys that maybe I didn't? And you guys want to really make a point or say anything, final thoughts before we start wrapping things up here?
I'll go. Try it. Whatever it is you're thinking in your head right now as you're watching this, try it. The minimum tools are available to you right now to be able to publish something on the chain that other people can buy and redeem. We don't have to have a perfect redemption system, right? eBay was really clunky when people started buying things from it. Etsy is still rather clunky when you're buying things that are one-off or not mass produced. Don't let the perception of these roadblocks, that things that aren't perfect, stand in your way. This is the frontier of something new, and everybody is doing less than perfect or less than efficient models to get their goals done. So, don't let anything standing in your way stop you. Do what it is that's in your mind, and let people tell you it's a bad idea quickly so that you can move on to the next great idea, right? Like, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to start. Go do it. The resources are there.
Eloquently put.
Yeah, that's very nice, Zach. Yeah, I mean, I think there's like the build mantra a lot in the BSV space, but I think often people think to build, you need to be technical, you need to know how to code, you need to like build an app, for example. But yeah, I think that like this Bitcoin economy and it is going to be so vast that I think everyone just needs to be kind of thinking about what they can start doing to kind of just serve other Bitcoiners today. And it might not be very big, right? Like on Relay, there's been a couple of like, I'm going to I'm going to branch your Twitch if you buy this NFT, right? It's just like a tiny little service like that. I guess it's like a genuine retweets kind of copy, but just someone doing it manually on Twitch. And you've got just these like really, just tiny little services that people are thinking about and just trying to offer value in whatever way they can, right? Because I think that's one of the beauties about Bitcoin is so mining is like miners can come and go, right? Like they can come in, they can come and mine, and then if they disappear, the network is just going to keep on churning about without them. And when they're ready, they can come back in and start mining again. And we're going to have, I think, a very similar ethos in the Bitcoin economy, where it's like if you've only got an hour that you can give to the Bitcoin economy, then like you can come and work for the Bitcoin economy for an hour and then you can just fuck off again, right? If you've got like 80 hours and you can work like full time, like like just manic working on Bitcoin, then you can do that as well. And if you're a developer, you can develop on Bitcoin. If you're an artist, you can draw on Bitcoin. Like this whole thing is just incredibly inclusive, that there's like a role for like every single 7.5 billion human beings to come and join, basically. So yeah, I think that's
you are valuable because you are human, and being human has value.
Yeah, exactly. It's beautiful, guys. Well, I've definitely enjoyed the conversation, getting to hear it from all angles today. It's been really great, and I can't thank you guys enough for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with me and to the viewers. So thank you, guys. I can't thank you enough. But with that being said, go ahead and smash up the likes and hit the subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. Share this video with a friend, and also follow us on Twitter at BritneyBits.